In the history of aviation, there are flights that took off and never returned. No distress signals, no wreckage, no clear explanations. They left behind a haunting void in human imagination and theories that still send chills down our spine. From disappearances over vast oceans to cases that have baffled investigators for decades, let's uncover the 9 most mysterious plane disappearances in the world. The disappearance of the BSAA Star Tiger in 1948 over the Atlantic Ocean is one of the most mysterious events in the history of modern aviation. It was not just a simple plane crash, but a story that has puzzled scientists, the military, and enthusiasts of the unexplained for decades. Star Tiger, an Avro Tudor 4 operated by British South American Airways BSAA, was considered a symbol of hope for British civil aviation after World War II. Yet the short journey from the Azores to Bermuda turned into one of the greatest enigmas of the 20th century. And what makes it especially haunting is the fact that the aircraft completely vanished without leaving a single trace. What do you think really happened to the BSAA Star Tiger? Was it simply an aviation accident caused by weather and technical issues, or was there some mysterious force behind its disappearance without a trace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On January 30th, 1948, Star Tiger took off from Santa Maria in the Azores on its final leg to Bermuda. On board were 25 people, including 6 experienced crew members and 19 passengers, many of them businessmen, engineers, and military personnel. The flight was expected to last around 12 hours. Everything appeared routine until the plane neared Bermuda, less than an hour from landing. Suddenly, all communications ceased. There was no emergency signal, no report of a problem from the cockpit. The Star Tiger simply disappeared into the sky. The weather that day was far from ideal. Strong winds and cold air forced the crew to fly at only about 600 meters above sea level, a very low altitude for a long-distance flight. Flying so low increased fuel consumption and left little margin for error in the event of an emergency. Still, the crew was highly experienced, having flown many transatlantic routes, so navigational mistakes or mishandling were considered unlikely. Nevertheless, investigators later suggested that just one minor problem at such a low altitude could have caused the plane to crash into the ocean before sending out a distress call. Immediately after contact was lost, a massive search operation was launched. Both American and British forces deployed patrol aircraft, warships, and even commercial vessels in the area to assist. For days, thousands of square kilometers of ocean were thoroughly scanned. The result was a complete void. No wreckage, no oil slicks, no bodies, not a single sign of the massive aircraft. The absence of any trace raised disturbing questions. If the plane had gone down, surely some debris or floating fuel would have been found. Instead, the Atlantic seemed to have swallowed everything whole, leaving behind only a chilling silence. What makes the Star Tiger case more haunting than most other aviation accidents is the fact that not a single trace was ever found. In other mid-ocean tragedies, such as MH370 in 2014 or Air France 447 in 2009, no matter how difficult, investigators still managed to recover debris, black boxes, or at least passenger remains as evidence. But with Star Tiger, all that remains is a record showing the plane took off and then vanished completely as if it had never existed. The absolute silence of the ocean, together with the total lack of any evidence, forced British investigators at the time to admit defeat in their official report. The cause cannot be determined with any certainty. Many theories have been proposed to explain the mysterious disappearance of the BSAA Star Tiger, yet all remain speculative. Some experts believe the cause may have been technical failure, as the Avro Tudor aircraft was notorious for design flaws, particularly its high fuel consumption on long flights. Others suggest the plane may have run out of fuel or been blown off course by strong winds, eventually crashing into the ocean without enough time to send a distress signal. Another possibility raised by analysts is that flying at such a low altitude made the Star Tiger highly vulnerable to turbulent air currents where even a minor disturbance could have sent it plunging into the sea within seconds. However, none of these theories have ever been confirmed, as in more than 70 years, no physical evidence has ever been recovered to reveal the truth. Beyond technical reasoning, the disappearance of Star Tiger has long been associated with the legends of the Bermuda Triangle. The region where the aircraft vanished is infamous for countless disappearances of ships and planes, often attributed to paranormal forces, magnetic anomalies, time warps, or even alien abductions. To many, Star Tiger was more than an accident. It was further proof of the deadly mysteries lurking within the triangle. The case became even more unsettling when just a year later, in 1949, another BSAA aircraft, the Star Ariel, also vanished mysteriously in the same region under almost identical circumstances. Two disappearances in quick succession cemented the idea of a curse hanging over the skies of the Atlantic. Today, more than 70 years later, the fate of the Star Tiger remains unsolved. Each retelling recalls an aircraft filled with hopeful passengers taking off with confidence, only to vanish into nothingness. The complete lack of evidence, no wreckage, no signals, no bodies, has ensured that Star Tiger endures as one of the greatest symbols of vanishing without a trace in aviation history, forever linked to the enduring enigma of the Bermuda Triangle. On December 28, 1948, a Douglas DC-3 aircraft with the registration NC-16002 took off from Puerto Rico, bound for Miami, carrying 32 people who expected a short and safe journey. Yet just a few dozen miles before reaching the Florida coast, the plane suddenly vanished from the sky without leaving a single distress signal or fragment of wreckage. In the middle of busy waters, where any accident should have been quickly detected, NC-16002 disappeared as if it had never existed. The incident is haunting not only because of the emptiness left behind, but also because it happened so close to land, turning this story into one of the most mysterious disappearances in aviation history. A shadow without answers that still looms over the Caribbean skies to this day. What do you think really happened to Flight NC-16002 that night? Was it a tragic accident, lost to the sea, or something far more mysterious? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your theories. The aircraft in this story was a Douglas DC-3, an aviation icon in the first half of the 20th century. Designed in the 1930s, the DC-3 served extensively in World War II and later became widely used in commercial flights. Its reliability and popularity made it even more baffling that such an aircraft could disappear completely. The NC-16002 was operating that fateful flight, departing from San Juan, Puerto Rico, and scheduled to land in Miami, Florida. On board were 29 passengers and 3 crew members, all expecting a short and safe journey. The crucial point of the story lies in the last communication. Around midnight, when the plane was only about 80 km from Miami, the pilot contacted air traffic control and reported that everything was normal. They even expected to land on schedule. That was the final message. Just minutes later, all communications ceased. Radar picked up no further signals. Controllers couldn't re-establish contact, and from that moment, the DC-3 seemed never to have existed. The disappearance was so sudden that there were no distress calls, no warnings of technical problems, no information about emergency descent. Everything was swallowed in silence. As soon as the plane failed to land, a massive search operation was launched. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard combed a vast area off Florida from the waters near the Bahamas to the deep ocean further out. Dozens of ships and aircraft were deployed. But what made the case haunting was this: not a single piece of wreckage, not a single body, not a single sign was ever found. For a plane the size of a DC-3 crashing into the sea would normally leave floating debris, oil slicks, or passengers' belongings. Yet everything was gone. Because of this silence, people began putting forward many theories. Some suggested the plane may have suffered electrical or fuel failure. In fact, reports indicated that the aircraft had minor technical issues during maintenance before the flight. However, this does not explain why absolutely no trace was left. A DC-3, weighing several tons, could not simply vanish in busy waters near Florida without leaving the smallest evidence. Other theories tied the disappearance to the Bermuda Triangle, fueling public fascination as the flight's last known position was on the edge of this infamous region with its long history of mysterious vanishings. What made this incident stand out more than many similar events was the extreme proximity to land. The plane was less than 50 miles from Miami. At that distance, search and rescue should have been highly effective. If an accident had occurred, witnesses on shore or nearby vessels could have seen or heard something. Yet no one reported lights, explosions, or any unusual signals that night. The plane vanished in absolute silence, a baffling swallowing by space. The DC-3 flight NC-1602 case also marked a turning point in the public's perception of aviation safety. At that time, flights over the Caribbean and Atlantic were no longer unusual, and the DC-3 had a reputation for reliability. Yet this disappearance reminded the world that the skies and oceans still held mysteries beyond human control. It was more than just an air accident. It became a symbol of enigma when a modern aircraft of its time could vanish right near land with no satisfactory explanation even more than 70 years later. To this day, the theories surrounding DC-3 flight NC-1602 remain speculative. Some believe the plane crashed into deep waters and was buried by currents. Others think it may have strayed off course and gone down in an area that was never searched. Some researchers even connect the event to unusual electromagnetic phenomena in the region, often rumored to disrupt radios and compasses. However, all of these remain hypotheses because no concrete evidence has ever surfaced. Above all, what makes this case haunting to this day is the vanishing without a trace. Unlike many other aviation accidents where at least black boxes or wreckage are recovered, DC-3 flight NC-1602 left behind only a void. In aviation history, there have been many controversial cases from Amelia Earhart to MH370, but the 1948 DC-3 still holds a special place. It didn't just disappear mid-air, it vanished right next to one of the busiest coastlines of the eastern United States. For mystery enthusiasts, this flight holds symbolic value. It represents the fragility of human technology against unknown forces. It also serves as a reminder that despite advances in science and radar, there are still moments when humanity can only watch events unfold, unable to grasp or control them. And in the case of DC-3 flight NC-1602, it was a silent ending, no farewell, no trace, just an empty space in history. On the afternoon of December 5, 1945, when the world was still settling after the chaos of World War II, the U.S. Navy launched what seemed like a simple routine training mission. 5 TBM Avenger bombers lifted off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, carrying 14 men who expected nothing more than another standard flight over the Atlantic. No danger, no combat, just a straightforward exercise. Yet within a few hours, that calm mission would transform into one of the most chilling enigmas in history. The entire squadron, known as Flight 19, vanished without leaving behind a single scrap of wreckage, a single radio beacon, or a single clue. What began as a routine drill became the very cornerstone of the Bermuda Triangle legend, a mystery that still haunts the seas to this day. If an entire squadron like Flight 19 could vanish without a trace during a simple training mission, what do you think truly happened that day in the Bermuda Triangle? UFOs, magnetic anomalies, human error, or something even stranger? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your theory. What makes this case haunting is precisely its ordinary nature. Flight 19 was not a dangerous wartime mission, but simply a routine training flight like thousands the US Navy had carried out before. Before departure, the weather forecast was favorable, showing no sign of major storms or unusual conditions. The TBM Avenger aircraft were sturdy, battle-proven machines of World War II, and the pilots were all experienced men. Everything suggested a safe start. But that very sense of safety made the disappearance even more mysterious because it contrasted so sharply with what happened just a few hours later. According to plan, the squadron would head east toward the Bahamas, then turn north, and finally back west toward Florida. At first, everything seemed normal until Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, commander of Flight 19, began reporting strange problems. Over the radio, Taylor said that his compass was not working properly and the entire squad appeared to be lost. Radio transcripts captured his unsettling words. Everything looks strange. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should. This detail chills many to this day, as it paints the image of seasoned pilots suddenly rendered helpless by an inexplicable phenomenon, as if they had wandered into a space completely different from the familiar world. For hours, ground control tried to guide the squadron home. They advised flying west, a direction that would surely bring them back to Florida. Yet Taylor seemed convinced he was flying over the Florida Keys and repeatedly directed his men east, farther and farther out into the Atlantic Ocean. Radio signals revealed heated debates among the pilots, with some wanting to break formation and find their own way back, but in the end, all stuck with their commander. As night fell, the transmissions grew weaker, breaking into fragments and then vanished completely. Immediately after the final radio signal from Flight 19 faded, the US Navy launched one of the largest search operations of its time. Dozens of warships and aircraft were deployed, combing thousands of square kilometers of ocean for days on end. Yet the results were astonishing. Not a single oil slick, not a single piece of metal debris, and not a single body was ever recovered. The absolute silence of the sea seemed to swallow the squadron as if it had never existed. What made the mystery even more chilling was that during the search itself, a PBM Mariner seaplane carrying 13 crew members also vanished without a trace. The Navy suggested the Mariner might have exploded mid-air due to technical faults, but the incredible coincidence of its disappearance convinced many that the Bermuda Triangle harbors a mysterious force beyond the reach of modern science. For this reason, Flight 19 became more than just another aviation accident. It became a symbol of the Bermuda Triangle, the stretch of ocean between Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda, long associated with tales of ships and planes vanishing. During the 1950s and 1970s, this case was constantly referenced in books, articles, and films, cementing the Bermuda Triangle's reputation as a graveyard of the sea. Numerous scientific explanations have been proposed. Some argue the pilots misjudged their position due to sudden weather changes and magnetic compass errors. Others believe Flight 19 simply ran out of fuel and crashed into deep waters beyond the technology of the time to detect. Yet with no wreckage ever found, these theories remain unsatisfying. This opened the door to countless supernatural explanations, UFO interference, space-time distortions, or even the existence of a portal hidden within the Bermuda Triangle. In truth, the U.S. Navy's official report concluded the disappearance of Flight 19 was unexplained. They admitted navigation issues, weather, and fuel could all have contributed, but none of these factors fully accounted for an entire squadron vanishing. This ambiguity helped solidify Flight 19 as one of the most famous mysteries of the 20th century. Looking back, Flight 19 shows how a seemingly small event can evolve into a global legend. If the 5 planes had simply crashed and wreckage been found, the story might have been forgotten, like many other aviation accidents. But the fact that not a single trace was discovered, combined with the eerie final radio transmissions, transformed the case into a tale that lives on in human imagination. Flight 19 became not just a disappearance, but a cultural icon, tied forever to the phrase, "the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle." Today, nearly 80 years later, Flight 19 continues to fascinate researchers, documentary makers, and fans of the paranormal alike. It serves both as a sobering lesson about the dangers of the sea and the limits of technology, and as an open-ended mystery inviting endless speculation. This blend of reality and legend has made the story of Flight 19 one of the strangest and most compelling enigmas of the 20th century, leaving an indelible mark on aviation history and the imagination of humanity. The phenomenon of Malaysia Airlines MH370 2014 Indian Ocean is not only one of the greatest aviation tragedies of the 21st century, but also one of the most unsolved mysteries in human history. On March 8, 2014, the Boeing 777-200ER, with flight number MH370, operated by Malaysia Airlines, took off from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, bound for Beijing, China. On board were 239 people in total, including both crew and passengers of various nationalities. Yet less than an hour after takeoff, this giant aircraft suddenly disappeared from civilian radar screens without leaving any emergency signal or distress call. This detail alone made the incident particularly strange and shocking to the world. A modern aircraft equipped with advanced monitoring systems could vanish completely in an era where tracking technology had already become highly developed. So, what do you think could really have caused MH370 to vanish without a trace in this modern technological era? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. The most striking and haunting aspect of the entire MH370 incident is its disappearance without a trace, a situation that seems to defy all conventional logic. From the very beginning, the aircraft's key communication systems shut down one after another in an unusual manner. The AQR's system, which transmits technical and maintenance data, was disabled, first followed by the transponder, the device that allows the plane to appear on civilian radar. This sequence does not resemble a sudden technical failure, since in typical accidents, the entire system would collapse at once or at least emit emergency signals. Instead, this gradual and seemingly deliberate shutdown raised the hypothesis of direct human intervention. Shortly afterward, MH370 veered off its direct route to Beijing, making a sudden turn southward and continuing to fly thousands of kilometers across areas with little to no surveillance. Malaysian military radar managed to track the plane for a while, but eventually it disappeared completely, leaving only faint pings from the Inmarsat satellite. These signals indicated that the flight had headed straight into the southern Indian Ocean, a vast remote expanse that lies almost beyond the reach of modern monitoring technologies, turning MH370 into one of the strangest disappearances in aviation history. This mysterious disappearance triggered a massive search effort unprecedented in history. Dozens of countries supported by advanced technology and at a cost of billions of dollars participated in the mission. Submarines, aircraft satellites, and seabed scanning equipment were deployed across hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of the Indian Ocean. Yet for the first several months, not a single piece of wreckage was found. This only deepened the mystery. How could a Boeing 737, one of the safest and most widely used aircraft in the world, vanish completely without leaving a trace in a world blanketed by surveillance technology? This detail led many to label MH370 as the Bermuda Triangle of the modern age. It took more than a year after the disappearance for the world to discover. The first fragments, believed to be from MH370, washed ashore on Reunion Island and later in other areas around the Indian Ocean, such as Madagascar and Mozambique. However, those pieces were only scattered tiny clues compared to the immense scale of the Boeing 777. The main fuselage, the two black boxes containing flight data and cockpit recordings, the very items that could unravel the entire mystery, have never been found. This absence of concrete evidence has left every theory about MH370's fate at the level of speculation. Some analysts believe the aircraft may have suffered a severe technical failure, leading to its plunge into the deep ocean. Others suspect it was an act of terrorism, or even a deliberate move by the captain who might have intentionally diverted the plane off course. There are also politically charged theories suggesting the truth has been concealed by international powers. Yet more than a decade later, not a single hypothesis has been confirmed with solid proof, and MH370 still stands as one of the greatest mysteries in modern aviation history. What makes the case even more remarkable is that it occurred in an era when humanity believed nothing can vanish completely. We have surveillance satellites, GPS, thousands of radar stations, and advanced detection tools. And yet a large passenger plane carrying nearly 240 people could disappear without leaving clear evidence. This fact has led many to question the true level of aviation safety and the reliability of global monitoring technology. The disappearance of MH370 became a shock that forced the global aviation industry to change. After this event, many airlines and international regulatory organizations tightened monitoring rules requiring aircraft to be tracked continuously by satellite to prevent a similar tragedy from happening again. This was considered an important step forward in enhancing flight safety. However, for the families of the 239 victims, these improvements could never ease the pain. They still live with anguish, knowing their loved ones vanished on a flight whose true cause remains unexplained to this day. The disappearance of MH370 is not just an aviation accident. It has become a symbol of the fragility and limits of modern science when faced with the unexplainable. It stirs curiosity, doubt, and even fear that humanity might not be fully in control of situations we thought were well prepared for. And to this day, whenever MH370 is mentioned, people cannot help but shudder at the thought of 239 lives vanishing along with a massive aircraft into the vast ocean, an unprecedented event, a mystery whose full truth remains locked away. In an era when the skies seemed to belong almost entirely to men, there emerged a woman who dared to challenge every limit, Amelia Earhart. Born in 1897, she not only reached for the dream of flight, but also rewrote aviation history with her pioneering spirit and relentless determination. From a young girl fascinated by clumsy spinning propellers, Earhart rose to become the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic in 1932, a triumph that captured the admiration of the entire world. Yet what made her name truly immortal was not just her records, but the immense mystery surrounding her fateful flight in 1937, when she vanished over the Pacific Ocean, leaving behind a question that has never been answered. Where did Amelia Earhart really go? What do you think really happened to Amelia Earhart on that fateful flight in 1937? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. What made Amelia Earhart's name immortal in human history was not only her illustrious achievements, but also her mysterious disappearance during her fateful flight in 1937. This was the most tragic chapter of her life and remains one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century, a story that even more than 80 years later has yet to find a satisfactory answer. By the mid-1930s, Amelia Earhart had already become one of the most famous pilots in the world, but she did not stop at the records she had achieved. With a desire to surpass all limits, Earhart set out to accomplish a journey no one had ever completed before, to fly around the world along the equator, covering more than 47,000 kilometers. This was an extreme challenge, not only in aviation technology, but also in physical endurance, mental strength, and navigation skills at a time when there were no satellites or GPS to assist. To prepare for the mission, Earhart chose the Lockheed Electra 10E, a modern twin-engine aircraft of that era, fitted with special fuel tanks to increase its range. Accompanying her was Fred Noonan, an experienced navigator skilled in long-distance flights. They planned to depart from Oakland, California, cross multiple continents, and return after completing their global circumnavigation, a journey expected to last more than a month. On June 1st, 1937, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan officially began their great adventure from Miami, Florida. In the early legs, they successfully crossed South America, Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, attracting global attention. By the end of June, they had completed over 35,000 kilometers, about 3/4 of the trip, and had only one of the hardest stages left crossing the Pacific Ocean. On July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan took off from Lae, New Guinea, heading toward Howland Island, a tiny speck in the middle of the Pacific. This leg, about 4,000 kilometers long, was the most dangerous of all. The reason was simple. Howland was only a strip of land less than 3 kilometers long, surrounded by endless ocean. A minor navigational error could mean missing it entirely. To assist them, the U.S. Navy stationed the ship USS Itasca near Howland Island to transmit radio signals for guidance. However, from the very beginning, radio communication between the plane and the ship was problematic. Signals faded in and out, and the transmitting and receiving frequencies were not properly aligned, making navigation extremely difficult. For hours, Earhart managed to send occasional signals to Itasca, reporting that they were trying to locate the island. At about 7:42 a.m., the final message from Earhart was recorded. "We are on the line 157, 337. We will repeat this message. We will repeat this on 6,210 kilocycles." Wait, that was the last time the world ever heard Amelia Earhart's voice. After that, all communications ceased. The Lockheed Electra, along with its 2 occupants, vanished without a trace in the vast skies and seas of the Pacific. The U.S. government immediately launched a massive search operation, the largest in aviation history up to that point. Dozens of warships and reconnaissance aircraft scoured the area around Howland Island at a cost of millions of dollars. Yet the result was nothing. No wreckage, no oil slicks, no trace of the plane or its crew. After weeks of fruitless searching, the operation was officially called off. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were declared missing. By 1939, she was legally presumed dead. But for the public, the question remained, where did Amelia Earhart really disappear to, and what happened to her? In the decades following Amelia Earhart's disappearance, countless theories have been proposed to explain the mystery, each offering a different perspective on the fate of the legendary aviator. The most common theory suggests that her Lockheed Electra simply ran out of fuel, crashed near Howland Island, and sank into the depths of the Pacific, where even modern technology has yet to uncover any trace. At the same time, many researchers emphasize the possibility that she may have made an emergency landing on the uninhabited island of Nikumaroro, more than 600 kilometers from Howland. Their fragments of metal shoes and even human bones have been discovered, lending weight to the idea that Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan may have survived for a short while before succumbing to starvation. Other accounts lean toward the theory that she strayed into the Marshall Islands, then under Japanese control, where she was captured and eventually died in custody. There are even claims from supposed eyewitnesses who insisted they saw Earhart alive after 1937, though the evidence remains vague and never verified. The diversity of these theories has ensured that Amelia Earhart's story is not just a personal tragedy, but also one of the most enduring and hotly debated mysteries in the history of aviation. To this day, the fate of Amelia Earhart remains unresolved, but regardless of the truth, her legacy endures. Earhart was not only a skilled aviator, but also a symbol of courage, freedom, and pioneering spirit. She broke through societal barriers and paved the way for future generations of women to dream big and act boldly. The story of the fateful flight in 1937 is not only a tragedy, but also a reminder of humanity's endless desire to explore. Across the vast Pacific, where the Lockheed Electra vanished, Amelia Earhart's final words still seem to echo, a testament to a spirit that never backed down from challenge. On March 16, 1962, the skies over the Pacific Ocean witnessed one of the strangest disappearances in American aviation history. A massive Lockheed L-1049 super constellation, carrying nearly 100 U.S. soldiers along with an experienced crew, was on a top-secret mission during the height of the Cold War. Yet just a few hours after takeoff, the aircraft suddenly vanished. No distress signal, no trace, not a single piece of wreckage. In the vastness of the ocean, it was as if the plane had been erased from reality itself. From that moment on, Flying Tiger Line Flight 739 became a ghost in the sky, leaving behind a question that has remained unanswered for more than half a century. What do you think really happened to Flight 739 that night? Was it a technical failure, sabotage, or something far more mysterious? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On board were 96 U.S. soldiers, most of them special forces, on their way to Vietnam to take part in training and advisory missions. Accompanying them were 11 experienced crew members from Flying Tiger Line, an airline that often provided transport services for the U.S. military. This was a special journey, and due to its military nature, many details were kept classified from the start. But this secrecy only deepened the mystery of its disappearance, because when the plane vanished, it wasn't just the loss of more than 100 lives, but also sensitive information tied to America's strategic plans. What made Flight 739 so infamous was not only the sheer number of people who went missing, but also the fact that it disappeared completely without a trace in the vast Pacific Ocean. On its route from Guam to the Philippines, the plane was flying at a stable altitude in good weather, and there were no signs of distress from the crew. Suddenly, ground radar lost all contact with the aircraft. No emergency signal, no distress call, nothing at all. A massive plane carrying over 100 people simply fell silent and then vanished as if it had never existed. The anomalies grew even stranger when offshore witnesses spoke up. Several sailors aboard a nearby oil tanker reported that at the exact time Flight 739 vanished from radar, they saw a massive flash of light flare across the still night sky, only to fade quickly, leaving behind a terrifying darkness and silence. The scene resembled a mid-air explosion, sudden and violent, leading many to believe the aircraft had broken apart at cruising altitude. Yet if such an explosion truly occurred, the biggest question remains, why was no debris ever found? A normal aviation disaster would leave traces, fragments of the fuselage, oil slicks, or floating objects on the ocean's surface. But in this case, everything disappeared entirely, as if the fireball the witnesses described had been nothing more than a mysterious illusion, deepening the enigma of Flight 739 even further. Immediately after Flight 739 disappeared, the U.S. military launched an emergency search operation on a massive scale, considered one of the largest efforts of its time. More than 200,000 square nautical miles of ocean were scoured by dozens of aircraft warships and other modern equipment. Rescue teams tirelessly circled the area, dropped buoys observed from above, and even used radar to detect unusual signs. Yet the results were shocking. Not a single body, no luggage, no wreckage was ever found. That absolute silence led many to believe the aircraft had been wiped clean from the face of the earth. For researchers, this was a paradox difficult to explain. For the victims' families, it was an unending grief, with nothing returned as proof. It is precisely this emptiness that has turned Flight 739 into one of the most haunting mysteries in aviation history. What made matters even stranger was the way the U.S. government handled the case. Instead of classifying it as an aviation accident and recording it officially, they listed it as a special military mission and withheld details from the public. This decision left the families of the soldiers and crew feeling abandoned, with their loved ones' sacrifice not properly recognized. This ambiguity fueled suspicions that information had been hidden, or at least that there were truths never revealed to the public. To this day, the disappearance of Flight 739 is still regarded as one of the strangest aviation tragedies of the Cold War, as more than 100 people vanished completely without leaving a trace. What makes it even more remarkable is that it occurred just as the United States was preparing to expand its military presence in Vietnam, giving rise to countless theories. Some believe the plane suffered a catastrophic technical failure that spiraled out of control. Others lean toward the possibility of terrorism or deliberate sabotage, since this was a highly classified military mission. There are also those who suggest that more mysterious, unexplained factors may have been involved. However, all of these ideas remain mere speculation, as no physical evidence has ever been recovered to confirm them. It is the element of no trace that makes this case so extraordinary. In aviation history, accidents usually leave at least some wreckage signals or floating bodies, but Flight 739 vanished entirely as if erased from history. It not only defied search and rescue efforts, but also challenged the very logic of physics and human observation. More than 60 years later, Flight 739 remains a question mark, hanging over the Pacific Ocean. No wreckage has been found, no explanation confirmed. It is both a human tragedy and a historical enigma, with the Pacific waves still keeping the secret of more than 100 souls. And perhaps it is this absolute silence that makes it one of the most compelling unsolved mysteries in aviation history. On a cold August afternoon in 1947, a sleek Avro-Lancastrian named Stardust lifted off from Buenos Aires, carrying 11 souls toward Santiago. It was a routine flight, a simple crossing of the Andes. Yet somewhere in those jagged peaks, the plane slipped not just from the sky, but from history itself. One final radio message ending with the baffling word Stendek crackled into the ether. Then came silence. No wreckage, no survivors, no answers. For more than 50 years, the Andes guarded its secret under ice and snow, leaving behind only questions and a haunting legend that would baffle investigators' families and conspiracy theorists alike. What do you think about the final message? Stendek. Was it just a telegraph error, a secret code, or a desperate signal in the very last moments? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On the afternoon of August 1947, Stardust departed from Buenos Aires, Argentina's capital, with its intended destination being Santiago, Chile. On board were 11 people, 6 experienced crew members and 5 passengers, including diplomats, businessmen, and a young woman eager to reunite with her family. The captain, Reginald Cook, had served during the war and was familiar with the challenging routes of South America. None of them knew they were embarking on one of the most fateful journeys of the 20th century. At first, the flight went smoothly. The aircraft crossed the vast pampas and approached the Andes, the colossal wall of rock dividing Argentina and Chile. The weather that day, however, was less than ideal. Thick clouds blanketed the skies, snowstorms flared up intermittently, and visibility was poor. Yet for the seasoned crew of Stardust, this was nothing unusual. They trusted their navigation skills and instruments, pressing on towards Santiago. But just as the plane prepared to descend, mystery struck. At 17:41, the radio operator sent the final transmission, ETA Santiago, 1745, Stendek. ETA meant estimated time of arrival, but Stendek was utterly unfamiliar. It did not appear in any international aviation codebook. Immediately after this message, Stardust completely vanished. No distress call, no cries for help, no trace of wreckage was ever found. From this moment, the case entered its greatest enigma, vanishing without a trace in the Andes. In the following days, rescue teams from both Argentina and Chile launched large-scale searches. They deployed reconnaissance aircraft, soldiers, and even experienced mountaineers. Yet amid the unforgiving Andes, every effort was futile. No scrap of metal, no oil slick, no sign of a crash. Pilots involved in the search even insisted that if a large aircraft like the Avro-Lancastrian had struck a mountain, some evidence must have been visible. But the Andes remained utterly silent, as though it had swallowed Stardust whole. The families of the passengers and crew fell into despair. They clung to the hope that perhaps the plane had made an emergency landing in some remote valley and the occupants were still alive, waiting for rescue. But as days passed, nothing surfaced. The bone-chilling cold, blizzards, and deep ravines created a perfect shroud for the plane's fate. Newspapers at the time dubbed it the ghost flight of the Andes, when a giant aircraft with 11 souls aboard could vanish without leaving a single clue, as if it had evaporated into thin air. In the entire story of the Stardust flight, the detail that puzzled and haunted people the most was the word Stendek in the final message. It became the center of debate for decades, as no aviation record ever documented the existence of such a term. Some experts suggested it was nothing more than a telegraphing error, perhaps a mistaken entry of the word descent, meaning descent typed in a moment of urgency. Other theories, however, interpreted it as a secret code reflecting the tense atmosphere of the post-World War II era, possibly tied to espionage activities. Bolder speculations saw Stendek as a desperate signal from the crew, or even a cryptic message beyond the scope of science. The absence of concrete evidence only added to its mystique, turning Stendek into one of the most frequently cited aviation mysteries in history. Time passed, and the incident slowly faded from public attention, but for the families of those lost, the pain never diminished. They had no bodies to bury, no truth to hold on to. For more than 50 years, the Andes kept its secret locked away. This silence led many to compare Stardust with other great aviation mysteries such as Flight 19 over the Bermuda Triangle or MH370 decades later. It was not until 1998, over half a century later, when climate change and melting glaciers on Mount Tupungato exposed pieces of metal protruding from the ice. When experts investigated, they realized these were the remains of Stardust. For the first time in more than 50 years, the secret was revealed. The aircraft had not cleared the Andes, as the pilots believed, but had slammed straight into the mountain at nearly 15,000 feet. The force of the impact shattered the plane, burying it deep in ice. Only with the melting of glaciers did its remains slowly emerge. Investigators concluded that due to bad weather and a critical miscalculation of their position, the pilots believed they had crossed the mountain range and began descending for Santiago. In reality, they were still high among the towering peaks. The collision with Tupungato ended everything instantly. It was a sudden death, with no time for a distress call. Although the truth was finally uncovered, Stardust's story still holds layers of mystery. Why was Stendek transmitted? Was it truly just a telegraphing error, or did it conceal another meaning? And did the crew realize their mistake in those last fleeting moments? These questions have never been definitively answered. More than half a century later, Stardust stands as a symbol of the Andes' unforgiving nature and of the limits of early post-war aviation technology. It reminds us of human fragility before nature and of secrets that can remain hidden beneath ice for decades, waiting for the day they are revealed. Today, when people recall Stardust, they remember not only a tragic flight, but also a historical period when aviation mysteries could stretch across half a century, leaving countless unanswered questions. And among all these details, the fact that it vanished without a trace in the Andes remains the most haunting, because nothing is more terrifying than a massive plane with 11 lives aboard, disappearing completely, leaving behind only the icy silence as if it had never existed. A massive Boeing 707 took off from Tokyo on an ordinary day in January 1979. On board were 6 experienced crew members and 153 priceless paintings by the artist Manabu Mabe. Just 20 minutes later, the entire flight vanished from the skies over the Pacific Ocean, no distress call, no warning. It was as if the plane, its crew, and the immense treasure of artwork had been erased from existence in the blink of an eye. The disappearance of Varig Flight 967 was not only an aviation tragedy, but also a chilling mystery. How could a modern aircraft completely vanish without leaving a single trace? What do you think really happened to Varig Flight 967? Was it a mysterious aviation accident, a conspiracy involving the priceless paintings, or something else beyond our imagination? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. The flight departed on January 30th, 1979 from Narita Airport, Tokyo, bound for Los Angeles. On board were only 6 crew members with no passengers, but inside the cargo hold was an extremely precious shipment: 153 paintings by the renowned Japanese-Brazilian artist Manabu Mabe, estimated to be worth over $1 million at the time. These works had just been displayed in an exhibition in Japan and were on their way back. The combination of priceless art cargo and a trans-Pacific route was already noteworthy, but no one imagined that this flight would become one of the most mysterious disappearances of the 20th century. The strange events began only 20 minutes after takeoff. The pilot made his final routine report to air traffic control, stating that everything was normal. The aircraft was flying steadily with no engine or system issues. After that, communication fell completely silent. No distress call, no emergency code, no warning was ever sent from the cockpit. In aviation, pilots are trained to respond instantly in emergencies, whether fire loss of cabin pressure, engine failure, or any other critical issue. They would immediately transmit a Mayday or Pan-Pan signal. Yet Varig Flight 967 did no such thing. This silence suggests one of two possibilities. Either the event unfolded so quickly that the crew had no time to react, or some factor prevented or forbade them from sending a signal. As soon as the Boeing 707 vanished from radar, a large-scale search operation was launched over the Pacific Ocean, covering thousands of square kilometers. However, for weeks afterward, not a single piece of wreckage was found. No oil slicks, no luggage, no wing or fuselage parts floating on the surface. Even the black box, designed to withstand severe impacts and transmit locator signals, was never recovered. This raised the enormous question: how could a massive Boeing 707 disappear entirely without leaving any trace? The lack of an emergency signal from Varig Flight 967 made the investigation far more difficult. If a signal had been sent, investigators could have pinpointed the final position and possible cause. But when everything ended with a routine contact followed by absolute silence, speculation filled the void. Some believed the plane might have exploded in mid-air, leaving the crew no time to respond. But this theory doesn't hold, since an explosion would have scattered debris across the ocean, where some would almost certainly have been found. Another theory suggested that the plane was hijacked to steal the valuable paintings. Yet if that were the case, both the Boeing 707 and the perpetrators, as well as the stolen cargo, vanished without a trace. Pulling off such a hijacking would have required extraordinary planning, and above all, a place capable of hiding such a massive aircraft, something virtually impossible. One of the theories proposed by many aviation experts to explain the absolute silence of Varig Flight 967 is that the crew may have suffered a serious medical emergency, such as a cockpit depressurization. When cabin pressure drops, suddenly oxygen levels in the blood fall rapidly, leading to hypoxia, a condition of oxygen deprivation in the brain that can cause people to lose consciousness within just a few minutes. If this theory were correct, the pilots and crew might have blacked out before they had any chance to send a distress call. However, in such cases, the Boeing 707's autopilot system would normally keep the aircraft flying steadily until it eventually ran out of fuel. The strange part is that radar should have recorded such a prolonged flight path, yet in reality, all signals disappeared instantly after the final communication. This eerie silence has led many to believe that the aircraft did not simply suffer a malfunction, but may have vanished abruptly, as if it were erased from the sky in a single moment. What truly confounds experts is the astonishing coincidence between the moment of absolute silence and the moment of complete disappearance. No warning signs beforehand, no clues afterward. Some aviation researchers have compared the case to other infamous vanishings, such as Flight 19, 1945, Bermuda Triangle, and Malaysia Airlines, MH370, 2014, Indian Ocean, where the common thread is the sudden and unexplained loss of signals. In addition, the immense artistic value of the paintings makes the case even stranger. Could it have been possible that the entire flight was somehow staged in order to seize these works, or was it simply an inexplicable accident hidden by the depths of the ocean? To this day, no hypothesis has been confirmed. The paintings, the crew, and the Boeing 707 itself all seem to have merged with the vast Pacific, leaving behind no trace at all. For this reason, the most critical and haunting aspect of Varig Flight 967 is the sudden disappearance without any distress signal. A pilot is trained to always transmit a warning in dangerous situations. But here, the absolute silence erased every opportunity to understand the cause. It was not only a loss for the families of the crew, but also a profound challenge for international aviation, as a modern Boeing 707 could vanish without an answer. Nearly half a century later, Varig Flight 967 remains an unsolved mystery. It is not only a tragedy, but also a chilling reminder that the skies and the oceans still contain dark corners beyond human understanding. And among all the unanswered questions, perhaps the greatest remains: why did the plane fall suddenly silent and disappear without a single distress call?